Good afternoon, everyone. We can go ahead and jump to the next slide. I appreciate the opportunity to provide the board and the community an update on our OPTN modernization efforts and key areas of focus. During the update, I'll highlight some of the progress on the special election, the patient safety efforts, some of our modernization discovery tasks, changes to the law regarding the OPTN registration fees, and some of our areas of focus for the remainder of the year. As a reminder, HRSA has been regularly providing updates on OPTN modernization on our website. You can follow the link when we share the slide deck to sign up for the HRSA listserv so that you keep up to date with the information that we share. Next slide. So for any folks who may be new, just a quick refresher on modernization. So while we appreciate that the national system has experienced significant growth in organ procurements and transplants over the last several years, many opportunities still exist to improve the system and the OPTN based on overwhelming feedback from the transplant community, surgeons, physicians, organ procurement organizations, hospitals, researchers, patients, patient advocates, Congress, and our own oversight efforts. A number of areas have been highlighted that would benefit from strengthening and improvement. So our modernization aims to improve the system by strengthening some of the OPTN's core functions, infrastructure, and processes to address some of the root causes that are maybe holding the system back from truly having patient centricity across all of the systems and processes, and delivering on the promise to organ donors, transplant recipients, and those who are on the wait list and their families. So really focused in the 5 areas that you see highlighted on the slide. Next slide. So part of our modernization effort and some of the legislative changes that have taken place over the last 2 years have resulted in a new operating model for the OPTN. So this slide just quickly depicts that new operating model, one that includes strengthened HRSA oversight over the entire network, all of the components, a board of directors that's independent from all OPTN contractors, and separate organizations supporting the board and all of the other operations of the OPTN. Bringing forward a diverse set of experts to support all of the different functions of the OPTN, and new ways to support the OPTN across various functions, and opportunities to relook at some of the processes and practices I think are essential to the success of the OPTN and the modernized OPTN. That includes strengthening communication, collaboration across. When you have more parties in the mix, you have more capacity and expertise, but that necessitates stronger collaboration and coordination. And so setting up a program management office in HRSA to align all parties is a part of our central effort there. The OPTN continues to be governed by a board of directors supported by board-appointed committees, leveraging the lived experience and expertise of all of the volunteers in designing and overseeing OPTN policy and membership requirements. That paired with robust federal oversight of the OPTN and the various contractors responsible for fulfilling operational activities, this model ensures that we're able to mitigate conflicts of interest and have the appropriate kind of checks and balances in the system, and really center our efforts on the needs of patients and families who depend on this system. So this is the new operating model that we're using moving forward, and we have been using for the better part of, this year and parts of last year. So we're going to continue to live into that. That brings us to our most recent efforts in modernization for the OPTN. You know, part of the call for modernization was to have a special election. So we can jump to the next slide and share a recap. There we go. All right, so we're pleased to share a recap of the OPTN special election that concluded last week. As you may have seen through our various communications, the process that we use for this special election, from standing up an independent transitional nominating committee that widely solicited for candidates and ran candidates through quite the rigorous review process. Many of you are on with us today, so you can testify to that. And having this rigorous review before developing this impressive slate of candidates that were reviewed and approved by the Secretary of HHS, to all of the efforts that we made to communicate about the special election and the timeline for the election, which was, much shorter than has been before. I think we did our election in a week versus the month that typically was there given time. And then finally, the record voter turnout. We had over 83% of OPTN members vote in this election compared to, on average, 68% over the last couple of years. And so we take that as a sign of enthusiasm and engagement. We hope to continue to foster this high level of engagement across the OPTN moving forward. We are so thankful to everyone who made the special election possible, especially the Transitional Nominating Committee. Really was a group of your peers. Their tireless service in the compressed timeline is a testament to their commitment to improving the system. This process forged a slate of new board members who are committed to strengthening the OPTN governance and aligning policymaking, operations, and system oversight efforts to better serve patients and families. We want to express our deep gratitude to the outgoing board and everything that you've accomplished over the last couple of years and your engagement in this transition phase as we work to modernize the OPTN. While I think it's safe to say we didn't always agree on the exact strategy and techniques to get toward modernization, we were able to make some critical progress in the last 2 years towards a stronger future, and you've laid some important groundwork that the next board will pick up and carry forward. Next slide. To the new board members, welcome. We look forward to working with you as you step into this new critical leadership role during a time of transition and help us continue to chart a course for a stronger system. If you missed the announcement on the new board members, you can definitely find the full listing on our website there. On Friday, we additionally emailed all of the OPTN voting members about the upcoming officer and runoff election. We had 2 tied seats, and so we're having a runoff for them, as well as voting on the officer positions. That'll take place the week of June 20th. That ballot will include candidates from the various officer positions amongst the newly elected board of directors, and more details will be posted on the special elections webpage ahead of the election, as we did in prep for the special election. The new board officially begins their term on July 1st, but they've already started getting onboarded in their new roles, I understand, starting last week and then this week. The new board has several critical projects ahead that they have to tackle in addition to supporting the routine operations of the OPTN. They have critical system-wide policy and safety concerns to address, the opportunity to review OPTN policies and bylaws and ensure that they are not a barrier to modernization and are focused on upholding the interest of patients and families. So that gives you a sense of some of the priority areas of focus for the board. Next slide. So moving to some of our priorities on the governance side of things, let's shift gears to patient safety efforts. Next slide. Great. Patient safety is at the heart of every aspect of OPTN modernization. To improve collaboration and mitigate future risks, this spring, HRSA instituted a new process to report allegations of misconduct. Some of the feedback in our stakeholder engagement that we had received over the course of our initial work on modernization was some of the concerns about raising concerns. If they, saw something or had concerns, getting those kind of addressed through the system. And so this new process gives HRSA full oversight of any of these allegations that are submitted, gives us a sense of what the allegations are, how they're being triaged, tracked, and adjudicated, investigated, reviewed, etc. As allegations of misconduct are reported going forward, HRSA will receive them, will review them, triage them, and then figure out what is the appropriate path for follow-up. HRSA takes these concerns really seriously. We're making sure we coordinate with appropriate federal agencies depending on the issues at play within the allegation. And we're ensuring both appropriate member level action and system-wide action is taken based on the review findings. And I think that as we continue through this update, you will see, and you've already seen some of the implications of reports, complaints, patient safety reports that have come forward to HRSA's attention. Those have been the circumstance that have spurred different critical comments and directives to the OPTN. So over the last several months, HRSA has also been collaborating with the OPTN via the critical comment process. And specifically, we've been focused on allocation out of sequence and normothermic regional perfusion. As you know, or maybe don't know, when a critical comment is submitted, the HHS secretary reviews it, and based upon the information that's come in, we may direct the OPTN to revise its policy and practices, initiating a federally mandated corrective action plan to promote improvement and uphold national standards. Going forward, HRSA will continue to collaborate with the OPTN to monitor and improve patient safety and outcomes connected to some of these issues. And let's, in the next slide, we'll get into allocation out of sequence in a little more detail. Next slide. Thank you. There's two things that I think we would all say we expect of the OPTN and the procurement and transplant system, that it is fair and that it is safe. And allocation out of sequence really gets at the heart of the fairness that we expect from the national system. So a critical comment submitted to HRSA spurred our review and evaluation of policy non-compliant allocation practices. We found that more and more patients who were matched to an organ were not receiving that organ. In fact, at points, our findings indicate that sometimes the transplant center is not even notified of the organ offer. The OPTN and the board are part of a 40-year tradition, right? This public-private partnership that's built on the understanding that there has to be rules around how we share this precious resource that support the integrity of the system to get donated organs to the sick patients who need them. OPTN members collaborated in a consensus-based manner to design the algorithmic or rule-based matching process and all of the related policies to ensure that those allocation rules are followed. However, when we notice that 1 in 5 cases, the algorithm-based match run or list is not followed, we have a policy compliance problem, or maybe an algorithm problem, or perhaps both. In any case, I think we can all agree that with the resources precious as a donated organ, and with more than 100,000 people waiting on the transplant wait list, playing by the rules is of the utmost importance to the fairness and transparency of the system. And we look forward to continuing to work with the OPTN and the community to address some of these concerns. Together, I have no doubt that we can make the system stronger and really uphold the fairness that we all know is so critical. Next slide. So while allocation out of sequence is a critical concern for patients, regulators, OPTN members, and it's one that needs to be addressed swiftly and thoroughly and thoughtfully, it's important to note that early indicators are showing some positive progress. Already, we're seeing that more organs are being allocated according to existing OPTN policy. Many people in the community were concerned that following the OPTN match run algorithm and policies would lead to more unused organs, right, or organ non-use, and often cited that as a rationale or justification for not following the consensus-based algorithm and policies. However, the good news is initial data appear to indicate that following the OPTN match run and policy does not necessarily increase organ non-use, as we've noted a decrease in organ non-use in April. So while we decreased policy non-compliance, meaning skipping, we've also seen a decrease in organ non-use. Again, we'll need to track this over a longer time. Practically speaking, that means that in April alone, more than 200 patients received an organ in the order that the OPTN match run had prescribed, meaning they got their fair chance at the organ based on their placement on the wait list rather than being skipped. And we didn't throw away more organs as a result of following the policy. Solving multifaceted problems at the national level in a complex system requires deliberate, systematic approaches, and that's what we've directed the OPTN to look at in this AOS remediation plan that you see here. So some of the key elements are listed on this slide, really having a focus on developing a shared understanding of the issue. How we define it is really critical to how we begin to address it. Developing transparent methods to assess compliance, monitor compliance, and enforce compliance. On the policy side, as we better understand the definitions and kind of compliance elements, we'll be able to see if we need to update the algorithm or policies. We also have an opportunity to make sure that the OPTN is not only tracking progress internally on policy compliance and fairness, but that the larger community, in the spirit of public trust, larger community, patients, and the public can see improvements in policy compliance and fairness as we do our work on this allocation out of sequence remediation plan. And then finally, we're working to support the creation of a web page for the allocation out of sequence work, a one-stop shop for all of the information and progress being made on elements of the remediation plan, the related efforts, the dashboards, the policies, the deliberation on the data standards, etc. If this engagement with the OPTN and community feels different, it's because it is different. This is one of the benefits of our modernized oversight and operational support model. We can collaborate better with the OPTN, providing better, more agile, timely support and oversight of the OPTN's efforts and all of our contractors' work to support the OPTN. So look forward to working with folks on this. As I mentioned, we will be establishing an allocation out of sequence webpage. It's not up yet, but you will be able to link to that webpage from the critical comment page so that you can track along the process and progress that the OPTN is going to make in terms of moving forward with this plan. And again, we're heartened by the progress already in policy compliance as the OPTN has begun to look at this with HRSA. Shifting from fairness, let's get to the other expectation of the system, safety. Let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. A review of the OPTN policies and insights from HRSA reviews have identified some critical gaps in OPTN policies and standards related to organ procurement practices. And gaps in those policies and standards is a disservice to half of the OPTN community, right? There's no transplant without procurement. And as a part of our modernization effort, we want to ensure that we're giving all of our components of the system and stakeholders their due attention and support to improve the system performance overall. The system only works if both procurement and transplant are safe and effective and continue to be safe and effective as science and clinical practice evolve. We want to make sure that all OPTN members benefit from proactive risk mitigation, existing best practices, and emerging promising practices. So here on this slide, you see a series of actions that HRSA is taking with the OPTN to strengthen safeguards in procurement. So we've already issued last year our data directive around procurement process data, really to help us understand the key processes that support successful organ procurement and transplantation, because it affects both, and really understanding that. So we're continuing to proceed with that data directive and those data collection and going through the clearance process. disease transition monitoring and strengthening that, organ procurement practices in the DCD pathway. So as you all may be aware, about half of donated organs are procured using this pathway, and we want to ensure safe, consistent practice across the system. Kind of similarly, in that vein, normothermic regional perfusion, this clinical advancement, when done safely, can increase access to transplant. And here again, we want to ensure safe, consistent practice across the system. You may be aware that HRSA received a critical comment about NRP and has issued a directive to the OPTN to assess best practice, collect more data, and monitor this practice moving forward so we can ensure that it is being applied in a safe and effective manner to support donor patients and to increase access to transplant. The last two, strengthened oversight. As you've seen already, HRSA is actively engaged with the OPTN in receiving and reviewing complaints, monitoring trends or shifting trends in practice, and then also using our insights from system and performance data, as well as a review of complaints, to accelerate learning and improvement across the OPTN. So you've seen us, as we've identified issues with the OPTN, encourage the OPTN to share that information as quickly as possible while work continues. So again, similar to our effort on transparency and engagement around the allocation out of sequence efforts, we will be sure to have a web page that chronicles our collective efforts to strengthen organ procurement practices as well, so people can continue to engage and have your voice heard as we develop these practices and implement them across the OPTN. Next slide. All right. Now shifting gears from the governance work, some of the patient safety efforts, to our discovery or strengthening of OPTN operations. You all may recall that last September, we issued a series of discovery task contracts to individuals to document certain functions of the OPTN, understanding, documenting, and evaluating the current state of the OPTN practice or system for that, as well as providing feedback on best practices, industry best practices, innovative ways to improve some of those processes moving forward. So they have been actively engaging with you all and conducting stakeholder engagement activities, spoken with many members of the OPTN, including many of you, many of the larger community. Thank you all for being generous with your time, engagement, and feedback. The discovery contracts will conclude between the end of June and September. And so we will be getting feedback from them on what they've documented in terms of the current state and opportunities to strengthen those core functions moving forward. So we look forward, as we get those deliverables and review that information, to synthesize it and come back to you and share some of the key findings and next steps with the board and broader community. Next slide. On the topic of operations and the registration fee. So some of you may be aware that in the spring of 2025, Congress passed the 2025 Full Year Continuing Resolution, Continuing Appropriations and Extensions Act, call a CR here. Section 1904 of that act gives explicit authority to HHS to collect the registration fees from OPTN member institutions for each transplant candidate that they add to the national waiting list. Historically, UNOS, as the sole OPTN contractor, has collected these fees from transplant hospitals when a patient was added to the wait list and used those to support the operations of the OPTN. With this new authority, HHS will directly oversee this critical function, increasing transparency, providing access to multiple vendors now to support the OPTN with these resources, and ultimately strengthening performance and accountability of the OPTN. This new law also calls for increased transparency measures, giving the OPTN community and public more insight into the fees received. And these measures also ensure that the fees are utilized to support the operations of the OPTN and improve outcomes for patients and families. So in the fall, HRSA anticipates beginning to collect these registration fees through the pay.gov mechanism. It's a secure, no-cost payment platform used across numerous federal agencies for these financial transactions with public and public institutions. So as planning progresses, we will be collaborating closely with the current OPTN contractor, multiple contractors, all of the transplant hospitals to go through the detailed information, talk about a transition process and related timeline, but just start thinking about the fact that we're looking towards later this year to make that transition to collecting the fees here in HRSA. Additionally, I'd like to take a moment while we're talking about registration fees and finances to discuss the registration fees and budget. As you may be aware, for the last few years, HRSA has not approved a increase to the registration fees because the OPTN had a significant excess of operating reserves. This surplus enabled higher spending in fiscal year 23 and 24 to accommodate some of the new priorities of the OPTN board without having to increase the registration fees. As we looked at the budget in fiscal year 25, it was created kind of considering additional priorities that the board had, and it was at even a higher level, reflecting some of the board's priorities. But since we were in a transition phase, moving to multiple contractors, looking at some of the various issues that we were looking at in terms of critical comments and the like, we asked for the OPTN to have a steady state budget because we were not ready to increase the registration fee while we looked at some of the finances and maybe transitioning towards HHS collection of the fee. So we're now in a position where we've gone through the operating reserve excesses and we've discussed recently with the OPTN that and as we discussed today, the OPTN has critical work ahead of it to address policy and safety concerns. So we're working with the board to rigorously prioritize projects and help us manage the overall cost for fiscal year 25. And so the finance committee and the board have been working really rigorously to look at how to reduce costs by two things: prioritizing projects or efforts, or cutting certain initiatives and paring them down so that we can focus on some of the critical policy and safety issues in front of us. But did want to flag for the community that there may be a need to increase the fee into the future to carry forward on some of these critical policy issues and kind of opportunities to strengthen safeguards that we need in the system. And that brings us to my final summary slide here. Great. So in summary, you can see that these are the primary areas that HRSA will be focused on with the OPTN to ensure the fairness, safety, and performance of the organ procurement and transplant system for the remainder of this year. In the governance arena, you see that we are focused on onboarding the new board, hiring an executive director, reviewing all of the OPTN policies and bylaws, and reviewing the final rule to ensure they all comport with the Securing the U.S. OPTN Act, the new legislation around fees, and align with the efforts around modernization. In the patient safety space, continuing to move forward on the remediation plan on allocation out of sequence, addressing the plan on NRP, working together to address strengthening safeguards and procurement practices, and then continuing to strengthen our safety oversight with the OPTN of complaints, patient safety issues, and other issues that are coming forward. And then finally, on the operations side, building up the process for registration fees, continuing to move forward on the data directives so we can start to implement some of that data collection, and then supporting technology modernization. So with that, I will be happy to take some questions.
And these are open session questions. We have closed session time with Suma after this is